Hello, everyone, once again, and welcome back to Suits and Laterals. I'm your host, Jeff Rich. I'm joined by Chris Green to talk about the NFL, both on and off the field. Hey, Chris, what's going on?
Oh, it's just another chilly day. Winter's actually hit out here in California. I don't know, do you actually get winter in Arizona?
It's the desert, so it cools down at night. But everybody listening back east just hates us every time we bring up the weather. So, winter's hit us. It warmed up a little bit this week. We got back into the 70s, but we had a little bit of a cold spell. I won't put a number on it.
Oh, we're in the 50s and 40. I guess we did touch 60, but it's been kind of miserable out here.
All right, let's get started. Let's first of all, let's kind of go through what happened last week. I think last week really began with Thursday night football. The Green Bay Packers visiting the Detroit Lions.
Yeah. Well, that is notable, actually. That was we were just talking about it. What notably happened? I guess the ending to that game would definitely count as notable.
All right, let's just talk about the last two plays. The last play, the last time down, and the last untimed down. Green Bay didn't look like they knew what they were doing. Detroit had the lateral play defended perfectly, though. They blew a 17-0 lead. They did lead, 23-21 late, and Green Bay was pinned back on their own 20. Detroit couldn't get the first downs that they needed. The Packers pinned back, tried a lateral play. It wasn't working, but they got bailed out.
Absolutely. Of all the times to get a face mask penalty, the very last play of the game, Green Bay looks like they're dead. The game's over. The Lions win. But no, there's a flag sitting on the field, and lo and behold, there's a face mask penalty on Detroit. Green Bay gets one on-time play left, and what's going to happen in that play? It's always the Hail Mary, and darned if that Hail Mary didn't come through.
Well, the funny thing was, you got a bunch of athletes with world-class speed, and then you have Richard Rodgers, and it was almost because Richard Rodgers was so slow to get to the the huddled masses down there waiting for the Aaron Rodgers ball to drop. There were jokes that it would have hit the scoreboard if they were playing at the Jerry Dome. Rodgers comes down with it. Detroit was, again, ready to defend a lateral play. But you're at the 39-yard line. It changes the circumstances. Aaron Rodgers, believe it or not, can throw the ball that far. Rodgers comes away with the touchdown from Rodgers, and the Packers win 27-23, keeping pace with the Minnesota Vikings there in the NFC North.
Absolutely. I mean, it was a game Green Bay had to have. Otherwise, they were going to be on the outside looking in. And you know what? They came through when they needed to. It was Aaron Rodgers with a miracle play.
Hey, we woke up the ghosts of Leon Lett and Dwayne Rudd with games that should be over. Let's just play a little bit longer, they say.
Yeah.
A team that you really don't want to see play any longer, that we probably shouldn't talk about here, but we do have a mutual interest in the Cleveland Browns. Austin Davis goes out and starts at quarterback, and playing a good Cincinnati Bengals team. It was about what you would expect, 37-3, or better or worse. What'd you think of Sunday's contest between the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals?
I thought they were playing in Cincinnati, actually, as many Bengals fans as I saw there. I don't know what there is to say. I mean, I definitely wasn't laughing at the end of this game or at any point during it. It was just a sad effort all the way around. I was kind of figuring Davis was going to get killed at some point as many times as he got hit. Whatever receivers were left got hurt. I'm surprised they didn't have linemen playing receiver at some point, but it was just an ugly
they might
game.
As well, because they sure as hell can't block, right?
Well, exactly.
So, all right, enough on the Browns. I brought up Leon Lett, so let's mention the Dallas Cowboys. They played on Monday Night Football because you can't flex out of Monday Night Football. They go into FedEx Field, play a really, really boring 58 minutes of football with the Washington Redskins, and then things started to get exciting there at the end. I believe the score was tied at 9. Deshaun Jackson fields a punt. At his 18, he runs about to the 24, and then, as Mike Tirico said, he's trying to hit the home run. And he runs backwards about 21, 22 yards to his own 4. Gets out to about the 9. To add insult to injury, it doesn't just cost his team field position. Also costs them possession of the football because he is stripped as he's going down. Dallas recovers, puts the ball in the end zone. It kind of brings up the debate of, did the Redskins let the Cowboys score? I know there was a big issue with the Big Ten Championship, slightly different circumstances, as Dallas could have run the clock down to nothing and then kicked it. Dan Bailey would have hit the chip shot as time ran out. Case was Darren McFadden runs for a touchdown. Debatable whether Washington's playing true defense in that situation. First of all, do you think they let him score? And second, is that a solid strategy in the moment there?
Well, I think it was a desperate gamble, is I guess the best way I'd put it. They were trying to get the ball back and have a chance to win. Otherwise, they weren't going to have a chance. So sometimes you just got to go for broke.
And you know what? It paid off. It paid off, and Deshaun Jackson got to redeem himself, though. Chasing the tie rather than being in a tied game, chasing the lead or the go-ahead score or the victory. Deshaun Jackson still comes away as the GOAT. And who loses here is the American people, the fans of the NFL that listen to Monday Night Football announcers talk about Robert Turbin being in the backfield for the Cowboys with their season on the line. I didn't get the memo, but I thought that they were a 3-8 football team, 4-8 after the victory. I know that everybody else in the NFC East is 5-7, but I still count the Cowboys out. I treat them like a genuine 3-8 football team, not in the hunt, just a football team finishing their games out.
Well, yeah, they don't have their starting quarterback in there, and can you really expect Matt Castle to win out, which is pretty much what they have to do at this point. I don't see it. I'm with you. They're done.
All right. Other games of note: Carolina wins 41-38 to go to 12-0, and the Philadelphia Eagles upset the New England Patriots. Patriots suffered their second loss in a row. The injury bug has caught up with them. I don't think that their hot start was a fluke or anything. I don't think that we should read too much into losing 2 straight, even to a terrible team like the Philadelphia Eagles, who do play in that NFC East. Anything to take away from those games? Carolina over New Orleans, Philadelphia over New England, both on the road.
I think the Carolina Saints game was a lot closer than I expected it to be. I'm still can't believe Carolina is undefeated, but they keep chugging along. As far as the New England Eagles game goes, I think the biggest thing I can take out of it is New England actually misses Dion Lewis very much.
I tend to agree with that. You'd think that they could just plug James White in there. You still have LeGarrette Blount. That Bill Belichick will find a way, and I think that Brady's his back's got to be hurting from carrying this team.
Yeah, exactly. And he's still missing some weapons and the wide receivers as well. So it's just going to be, I think they're just biding their time, hoping they can get some receivers back come playoff time and then see what happens. All
right. So in the city of brotherly love, I don't think there's any question about it. The Phillies stink. The Eagles, in relative terms, stink. They're being made to look a little bit better by their awful division, but this is a 5-7 football team. I don't think this is what Jeffrey Lurie had in mind when he brought on Chip Kelly, and they shelled out the cash for DeMarco Murray, and they let Chip Kelly play God with this roster. I don't think 5-7 at the 12-game mark was at all what the brass in Philadelphia had in mind. I don't know how the Flyers are doing, but I can tell you for a fact that the Philadelphia 76ers stink. And that's going to kind of bring us into our kind of a non-conventional off-field topic, but I think it's worth discussing. You want to fill in the blanks here, Chris?
Yeah, so, if you don't pay attention to basketball, the 76ers have been the worst team in the NBA for quite some time. They actually just won their first game of the season the other night, so they're, 1-27 or something like that at this point. But they've just been terrible. They've pretty much they're tanking without officially tanking, I guess is the best way to put it, trying to secure as many top draft picks as they can. I mean, they aren't signing any quality free agents. They're just taking their lumps and trying to build through the draft. So comes out that, NBA owners aren't too thrilled about the 76ers plans and how they're going about things, because they feel the pinch too when the 76ers come to town and nobody wants to go to those games, so they're losing money on that end. So the owners all get together with the league and say, hey, you need to do something about them. So it's been ongoing since 2014, but just something that just came to light is the 76ers hired Jerry Colangelo, the former owner of the Phoenix Suns, and is also the guy that's in charge of USA basketball for the men's national basketball team. And he is there now to help them right the ship. So this is a pretty controversial thing, I would say. I mean, it should be good for Philadelphia. I mean, Colangelo has a good record when he was both an owner and what he's been able to do with USA basketball. So will this improve them? But I guess the bigger question is could the NFL look at doing something like this with some of the lower teams that no matter what they do, they continue to struggle year in and year out?
Yeah, who is football's Jerry Colangelo? Somebody that's not in the game anymore, but young enough to be competent, has a good track record. We've heard names mentioned for various teams, to take over as team president or whatnot.
And it's always the same names. It's usually Bill Parcells, Ron Wolf, those types who have been successful either coaches or GMs at some point in their career. But I mean, like you said, young enough. I think that's the key word there. Is I don't know that any of those guys are young enough. And I mean, as us Brown fans can attest to, I mean, look what the Browns did a couple of years ago when they brought in Mike Holmgren, who is younger than both of those guys and was a total disaster.
Well, Holmgren had the track record as a coach.
Well, yes.
His only track record as a front office guy was that his teams got better when they got rid of him in the front office.
Mm-hmm. True. But, I mean, is this something you think NFL owners would go to? Because, I mean, I don't think the money is as big of a deal because of all the deals that the league has, and I think their revenue sharing is probably better than the NBA's is at this point anyway. Or am I just kind of just throwing something up against the wall that'll never happen?
I don't know that I've heard owners be frustrated with incompetent teams. They let Al Davis stay at least 10 years too long. We've seen it all over the league. They didn't really drive Randy Lerner out of the job after he inherited the Cleveland Browns from his father Al.
Mm-hmm.
But I can think of a lot. How about the Bidwell family? I mean, how long was the Chicago / St. Louis / Arizona Cardinal organization completely dysfunctional, and they just they just walked on by basically. So I can't imagine. I think that there's got to be some shame with Paul Tagliabue for the way that the Browns Ravens expansion Browns situation worked out. But he's not here to be accountable anymore. This isn't Roger Goodell's mess. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that there's really anybody that's going to step up in the NFL. It'd be interesting to see a guy like Bill Polian or it'd be interesting to see Cleveland be successful, not just as a Cleveland fan, but Giants, Packers, Cowboys, Browns, Steelers. Those are the teams that just have so much history behind them. I don't know if I mentioned the Bears, them too. Yep. They have so much history behind them that it would just be a shame. I don't think that anybody's really upset that San Francisco's taken a nosedive. They had some success in the under Bill Walsh and the one Seifert team as well. But I think that there are teams that you want to do well, but it doesn't matter in the NFL. Like in basketball, we're talking about basketball. You got to be good on the coast. What happens in between really doesn't matter. That's why San Antonio is such an outlier. That's why the Cavs with LeBron James are somewhat different because they don't have that big city atmosphere. They're not coastal. In football, it doesn't matter. The the flyover states is where it's at. The Green Bay Packers, the Dallas Cowboys, the Pittsburgh Steelers. All those teams are in between. If the Jets, Giants, and 49ers and Seahawks aren't good, nobody cares because you're just going to watch the teams that are good.
Well, like I said, I think it's some of that's a money play because, like I said, I think the NBA, where the owners are feeling it a little bit more in their wallets, why this has happened. Whereas the NFL, you haven't heard of these situations, teams losing money like that because of all the deals that they've done. And I mean, the NFL is, let's be honest, is a 365-day-a-year enterprise anymore. I mean, the NBA, you do hear it disappear for a while during the summer months, but the NFL never disappears, whether it's the draft or the regular season, the playoffs, training camp. There's always something going on with the NFL. So I think that's one of the big factors in it. But I also wonder if something like this happens and is successful in the NBA, is that a roadmap for other leagues to follow in that steps?
Yeah, I don't think the NBA, or I don't think the NFL has anything equivalent to try to sell a Wednesday night game between the Pelicans and the 76ers. There are bad games. I mean, we point our, I mean, you could look at Monday Night Football.
Sure.
You can look at Thursday Night Football on most weeks, but you can look at this week's Monday Night Football game between Dallas and Washington. Sure, it's a traditional rivalry. Sure, it's supposedly got playoff implications in the NFC, but it sells itself basically. Even they had Ravens Browns last week, and that was a game between a 2-9 team and a 3-8 team, and it did just fine. So in relative terms, it's just hard to even put the NBA in the same conversation with the NFL. Not to slight basketball or its fans or anybody interested in the game, but just to say that the NFL has something going on that really can't be put side by side with any other sports faction, at least in this country, anyway.
I mean, is there any situation where you think you could see the NFL doing that at some point? I mean, or would it just take a team like practically being on the verge of being bankrupt, or would that not even matter? Would they just get rid of the owner and make him sell the team?
I'd be curious how they'd handle like a Donald Sterling situation. I think it would come to that. I think it would come to borderline criminal conduct. Oh, hey, the Browns have that.
I was gonna say we already hit that nail on the head.
So I mean, if they haven't jumped at everything going on with Jimmy Haslam. And his, the federal investigation into, his other interests, the pilot flying J, truck stops and gas stations. I just don't see it happening. The problem with the Browns, we talked about this pre-show, and I said, well, other than the obvious, which is the Browns, who else might that apply to? And you said Detroit, who's in the playoffs this year. It was 2015, January 2015, that they were playing the Dallas Cowboys in the playoffs. So, they had something going right there, at least for a little while. The Titans, I think the Titans are in dire straits. I think the Buffalo Bills have very quietly not been relevant for a very long time. And, the Raiders are on their way up, but how much do you trust the Davis family there?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is something we had talked about before. NFL owners are concerned about, they may not let the Raiders go to L.A. because they don't want Mark Davis ruining the L.A. football market again. So that's a thought and comes into play there. And another team I mentioned to you too was the Jaguars. I mean, think about that. All these rumors about them possibly moving to one of those London teams if they ever go that route. I just wonder, is that necessary? Is that just I know they have an owner who's been there only a couple of years now, so maybe not historically is on his side yet, but who knows?
Well, what did the NFL do when expansion teams came into the league? What did they do with Houston? Did Houston just have a bidder buy the team and then they ran it however they see fit? Ditto for the Browns in '99.
Yeah, exactly. They did like you said, they had bidders. They had all the groups bid, and they picked whoever had the highest bid at that point, and that's who got the team. And I mean, up until recently, Texans have been pretty successful overall. I mean, I know they've struggled the last couple of years, but they've been. That Bob McNair is considered one of the better owners in the league. I know that's one thing we've never heard about any of the Cleveland owners.
Oh no, not at all, not at all. I see. You know what? I kind of want to clarify that I don't think that we'll ever get to the point where the NFL is putting front office personnel in place, for the better interest of the league.
Yeah.
But they can absolutely get to a point where they could force a guy. They could force a guy like Haslam to sell the team. Whether it's for incompetence or for criminal mischief, is left to be determined. But I mean, I could see the NFL dictating that.
Well, I mean, they forced DeBartolo out.
Yeah, things like that. And they're not doing too much better with York, right?
Yeah.
Well, recently,
Yeah.
It's all about what have you done for me lately. Hey, speaking of that, let's look ahead to the Week 14 games.
Okay.
I think that we start off with a bang. Usually the Thursday night games are nothing to be interested in, but somebody had the clairvoyance to see the Minnesota Vikings as a relevant team to take on the Arizona Cardinals in Glendale, Arizona on Thursday night, 8:25 Eastern Time kickoff. Cardinals are rolling. Not the Bengals, but the Vikings, led by former Bengals head coach Mike Zimmer, are in the hunt. They're really relevant, and I can't figure them out because if you just put that Seattle game in a vacuum, I think it's a lot more what we expected from the Minnesota Vikings than an 8-3 record going into that football game.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Vikings have been one of the bigger surprises this year. I mean, some of that definitely helped with the resurgence of Adrian Peterson. I mean, obviously they didn't have him last year, so that was a big loss for them. And they've kind of gone as he's gone this year. When he does well, they usually win. And if he doesn't do well, they have trouble putting points on the board. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater's still a young quarterback and is still learning in the league. So yeah, he's just not ready yet to take them to the next level. So if they're able to get a running game going, they've got a pretty tough defense. I think they could make a game of it with Arizona, but I mean, Arizona has been such a great team all season long, and I know we talked about it last week. I was concerned about their running game, and you're like, oh no, they'll be fine, and sure enough, what's the guy's name? Johnson.
David Johnson ran for 99 yards, and Kerwin Williams looked good too.
Yeah, so they continue to roll, and I think they're going to roll again this week.
I tend to think that too. I think that Thursday night definitely favors the home team more often than not, and I think the Cardinals are a Super Bowl favorite maybe in the NFC. No disrespect to Carolina, who's taking on the Atlanta Falcons, two teams that started off really hot. Carolina didn't get the memo that you're supposed to start losing games after a while. Let's see, they both started out 5-0. Atlanta dropped the contest to the Saints. Tampa Bay, San Francisco, Indianapolis, Minnesota, and Tampa Bay again. So they got swept by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and after a 5-0 start, they are 1-6.
Yeah, I mean, they've really come flying back to earth. So I don't know, is it a matter of they hit the wall or teams finally figured out, the changes they've done on offense, but they started off great, and they kind of went the route of what I thought Carolina was, where Carolina has just taken off, and they haven't looked back.
Well, is there something to that with Kyle Shanahan? Because the Browns were 7-4 with him calling the offense, and then suddenly his quarterback, the starting quarterback wasn't good anymore. The team just couldn't play. They had some injuries on the Browns last year, but. Is there something to this zone blocking scheme that just gets figured out after a while, and is it something that Gary Kubiak has to worry about in Denver?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, the zone blocking schemes worked for years in Denver, so I wouldn't think it's so much that. But, I mean, I saw somebody the other day is calling Kyle Shanahan the quarterback killer.
Who knows? He's been good for Devontae Freeman, but, Matt Ryan's just one of those guys that's, like, solidly above average, but not quite elite. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's kind of been one of the questions about him. I always thought he was a little bit underrated, but the way he's played this year, he's kind of, he's living up to that bill. I mean, I thought he was one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league, and now he's more middle of the pack than anything.
All right, let's look at Carolina. Obviously, Cam Newton's at least in the conversation for the MVP award. Lots of playmakers on both sides of the ball. Let me ask you this, Chris. other than Newton, other than the quarterback, which I think applies to about 29 or 30 of the 32 teams in the league, what player could they most ill afford to lose on the Carolina Panthers?
Kuechly?
I think Kuechly, Thomas Davis, Josh Norman. I think you lose any of those guys. You almost go from being an A+ team to an A- B+ team. Sure, it's next man up and everything else. Everything like that. Sean McDermott does a great job with that defense. Rivera seems to have suited his offense to Cam Newton and the spare parts of Ohio State wide receivers and former Browns running backs and everything else. So, I think that Kuechly is a special player. I think that because of Cam, because of the popularity of J.J. Watt, he doesn't get the recognition he deserves. But Luke Kuechly is just a heck of a player. He could play for my team any day of the week.
Yeah, I wish I had him on my team. So do the other 31 teams.
All right. What other games do we want to talk about? So how about Cincinnati hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers? Steelers, really they lose this game, they can't get the division, but it's a long shot anyway with them at 7-5 and Cincinnati at 10-2. Bengals coming off a big win over the Browns. Steelers coming off a big win over the Indianapolis Colts. Pittsburgh starting to get healthy. Are they starting to get hot as well?
They seem to be. I mean, they have the offense going again, so it's just a matter. I think it's all going to come down to health and keeping Roethlisberger healthy at the end of the year is going to make a difference or not. I mean, that was the one thing this year was we expected them to have a big offense, but their defense has kind of picked it up a notch. So if they can hold the other team down, and I think Pittsburgh's got a chance. I don't know if they're going to beat Cincinnati because Cincinnati's a very, very good team. But I still think I wouldn't rule Pittsburgh out of the playoff hunt just yet.
How does Cincinnati stack up with the other big players in the AFC, the New Englands and the Denvers?
I like them. Other than the history that we've talked about can Andy Dalton do it in January, I think they stack up with the other teams very well. I mean, I'd say I'd probably take them over Denver at this point, and depending on New England's health, I may even consider them ahead of New England.
All right, if we could cede division titles to New England, Cincinnati, Houston, Denver, we got a couple teams vying for basically two spots at the end of the day. Kansas City Chiefs and the Jets, both at 7-5, would be in the playoffs. But do you look at teams like Indianapolis, Indianapolis or Houston, really, whoever doesn't come out of the AFC South, Buffalo, maybe even the Raiders at 5-7, to make a run? I mean, do you see any of these wild card teams being potentially better on any given Sunday in January than the perennial contenders?
Are you putting Pittsburgh in that category too?
I'm gonna. You know what? It's funny because Pittsburgh would not be in the playoffs if they started today. But yeah, I guess I could throw Pittsburgh in there.
I would probably take Pittsburgh over the rest of the wild card contending teams. I think they're the best overall team. But I mean, your Kansas City Chiefs, I mean, they've won 6 in a row, and they're as hot as anybody in the league that's not Carolina right now. So it'd be hard to bet against them. But I think those two and everybody else would be a one and done for sure.
I've believed in the Chiefs for a while, even when they were 1-3. I started to doubt them a little bit when they were 1-5, but I believe in these Kansas City Chiefs. I believe that the time is now for them to win a playoff game. It's better. They're in Browns Bengals territory as far Lions territory as far as going without a playoff victory. I believe in the Chiefs, and I believe in this podcast. You should subscribe to the podcast. You can find us at suitsandlaterals.com. We're part of the Four Lights FM podcast network. You can get us on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. You can follow us on Twitter. Chris is at CGRN731. I, Jeff Rich, am at by Jeffrich, BYJEFFRICH on Twitter, and you can follow the show at Suits Laterals. And that's going to do it for our program tonight. Hope to catch you next week. This has been Suits and Laterals.